afternoon. I think everybody got a sheet and finish up the book of Joshua. Next week, we'll be getting into the book of Judges, which at least that's the plan as of now. And I'm really looking forward to the book of Judges. It's really fascinating how the book of Judges is laid out. Because the book of Judges isn't actually laid out chronologically. The book of Judges is laid out thematically. And it's really interesting to piece that together and actually see what the author is trying to teach us. So we'll start that next week. But Joshua chapter 10 is where we're going to begin. And just kind of real quick review, last week we got into really kind of the main portion of Joshua dealing with the conquest of Canaan. And with the conquest of Canaan, it's from chapter 5, verse 13 through chapter 12. And there are three main campaigns, as we noted last week. The first campaign at the beginning with Jericho, was to go through basically the middle of the country and to divide the north from the south. And so it's kind of a tactic of divide and conquer. And then that keeps the north and the south from forming an alliance, and so it actually weakens the forces of the enemies there. And from there they went south, and as they go south and begin to try to take Gibeon, they are deceived by some Gibeonites who say, we're from another country from far away, and they come in and deceive them. And so Joshua actually makes a league with them of peace, and then they come to find out, well, no, we're Gibeonites, and we were afraid of you, that you were going to kill us, so we decided to trick you into making a covenant with us that you weren't going to kill us. And so they left the Gibeonites alive and basically put them to work, and they became servants and slaves for the people of Israel. And so that really kind of begins a trend, something that they shouldn't be doing, because God's orders were to go in, kill everybody, wipe everything off, don't leave anything remaining. But they started off with this covenant with the Gibeonites, and there are other nations then that they don't drive out that they were supposed to. And let's go to chapter 10. And chapter 10 records one of the battles of the southern campaign. And this is where we find Joshua's longer day. And I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I want to point out a few things from this chapter, though. But notice here, chapter 10, verse number 1. This is part of that southern campaign. Now it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai, and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel, and were among them. That they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof were mighty. So basically what he's afraid of is the alliance now with Gibeon, because Gibeon is a large city, had a large army, and so this increases the strength of Israel. So now what Adonizedek wants to do is get the remaining nations together to form an alliance to come down and to destroy Gibeon. Because he figures if we destroy Gibeon, that will weaken the forces of Israel, and then Israel won't be as strong and won't be able to take us. He doesn't understand Israel's not fighting by their own power. God's the one who's fighting for them. But notice here, he says, verse 3, Wherefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent unto Hoham, king of Hebron, and unto Piram, king of Jarmuth, and unto Jephthah, king of Lachish, and unto Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come up unto me, and help me, that we may smite Gibeon, for it hath made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, gathered themselves together and went up, they and all their host, and encamped before Gibeon, and made war against it. Now, just real quick, a thought that came to my mind. It's interesting to note here that Jerusalem has a different king now. Who was the king prior to this that we know of? Who was the king of Jerusalem prior to Adonizedek? Anybody remember? Genesis chapter 12, or 15. Melchizedek was the king priest of Salem, which is Jerusalem. Okay, well now there's a different king there, Adonizedek. There's an imposter king. Who is Melchizedek a picture of? Jesus Christ. Now there is somebody here ruling in his place in Jerusalem. And so that is a really interesting parallel, I think, to what's coming in the future. But let's keep going here. Verse 6, the men of Gibeon sent unto Joshua to the camp of Gilgal, saying, Slack not thy hand from thy servants, come up to us quickly and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered together against us. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said unto Joshua, Fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand. Therefore shall not a man of them stand before thee. Joshua therefore came unto them suddenly, and went up from Gilgal all night. And the Lord discomfited them before Israel, and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them along the way that goeth unto Beth-horon, and smote them to Azekah, and unto Makkedah. And it came to pass, as they fled from before Israel, and were in the going down to Beth-horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. They were more which died with the hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. Now verse 12, this is where we get into the longer day of Joshua. Then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So the moon stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. Now this is really interesting. We'll get into some of the details of this in just a moment, but there's a lot of people that come up with some really radical explanations for this event of the sun and the moon standing still. There are some that would say, well, it just appeared that the sun stood still. Does it say that it appeared like the sun stood still? No, especially when you get a whole nother day added to it. That's pretty radical. I read some people say, well, it was some sort of gases in the air, and so it just kind of caused some weird reflection, and so it looked like it. Some people say, well, it was it was an eclipse that took place. Well, it's very important to notice that the sun is standing still over one valley, and the moon is standing still over another valley at the same time. This is not an eclipse that's taking place of any kind. What is taking place here? Nothing more than a miracle. You cannot explain this scientifically. We can get into the whole thing, did the sun actually stand still or did the earth stand still? I don't think we need to go there, and probably it would be best not to go there lest you think I'm crazy. But the sun stopped. The moon stopped. They stopped moving for an entire day, and so obviously this is at a point where the sun is starting to go down, and it's nearing towards sunset, because that's the time of the day when you would see both the sun and the moon, and they stop, and it continues on, and the day just keeps going until this battle is won. See, one of the things we need to understand is miracles cannot be explained scientifically. That is why they are miracles. They are things that go beyond, they are outside of the laws of nature. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a miracle. Like when Jesus raises a dead person. There is no scientific explanation for that, how that takes place. How Jesus could be crucified and then be raised again. There's no medical or scientific explanation for those things. How a person who has his ear cut off and then all of a sudden has his ear when Jesus lays hand on him. How that happens, I don't know. There is no medical explanation for that. There's no scientific explanation for that. That is a miracle. That is a demonstration of God's power over the laws of nature. He made those laws, and He can change those laws and interfere with those laws anytime He wants to. That's why it's a miracle. Now, I want you to notice here, what takes place in chapter 10 is really a foretaste of Israel's future deliverance. We know Israel is supposed to conquer the land, and God had promised to them the land from basically the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the Euphrates River. That was the land that God promised them, from the land of Syria all the way down to the Nile River in Egypt. That was supposed to be the land that Israel conquered. Now, did they conquer all that land? No, they didn't. But it's going to happen one day. And here they get a foretaste of how that's going to take place. Notice here, in the gray box, they have the false king over Jerusalem. Adonizedek means Lord of righteousness. Well, obviously, he's not the Lord of righteousness. He is an impostor. He is similar to Antichrist. He has usurped the place of Melchizedek as king of Jerusalem. And, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, what do we know? In Jerusalem, there will be the man of sin, the man of lawlessness, who will stand in the temple of God and proclaim himself to be God. Who is that? Well, that's the Antichrist. He's the impostor. He's the one who claims to be in the place of Christ himself. Also, we see that there will be an alliance between the king of Jerusalem with other kings to war against Israel. We saw that in verses 4 through 7. Adonizedek calls on the other nations to form an alliance to go to fight against Gibeon and thus to fight against Israel. Well, let's keep your place here. Let's look over to Revelation. Is this going to happen in the future? This is one of the things, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, that, several weeks ago now, that Joshua is kind of a parallel to the book of the Revelation in some events. We get kind of a shadow of the conquest that's going to take place when Jesus returns and takes back the land for the nation of Israel. So Revelation chapter 17, we have Mystery Babylon the Great is the kingdom of the Antichrist. In Revelation 17 verse 12, the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast, and these shall make war with the Lamb. And the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. That's exactly what we see in the book of Joshua. You have an alliance with the false king of Jerusalem, with the kings of the nations, and they come against Israel, but Israel defeats them. Joshua defeats them. And those that are with Joshua are called and faithful and chosen. Another one that we see there with Joshua's longer days, signs in the sun and in the moon. And what does Jesus say in Matthew 24 is going to take place? Acts chapter 1, Joel chapter 2. Just prior to the great and terrible day of the Lord, when Jesus returns, the sun will be dark and the moon will not give her light. The stars of heaven will fall. There will be signs once again in the sun and in the moon. If we look back to chapter 10 of Joshua, keep your place in Revelation, but chapter 10 of Joshua, and notice down to verse number 16, verse 15, and Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, unto the camp to Gilgal. But these 5 kings fled, and hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah. And it was told Joshua, saying, the 5 kings are found in a cave at Makkedah. And Joshua said, roll great stones upon the mouth of the cave, and set men by it for to keep them. And stay ye not, but pursue after your enemies, and smite the hindmost of them. Suffer them not to enter into their cities, for the Lord your God hath delivered them into your hand. Now, notice in Revelation, chapter 6. This is the opening of the 6th seal. which is an event that takes place in accordance with the coming of Christ to the earth. Verse 12, and I beheld when he opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. The stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heavens departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. And every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come. And so we see a parallel there as well. The Lord fought for Israel. We're told twice in Joshua chapter 10, verse 14 and verse 42, that the Lord fought for Israel. Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 3 says that the Lord will fight for them as in the day of battle when he returns. Joshua 10:24 we have here. Joshua tells the people, Come near, put your feet upon the necks of these kings. Show that they are defeated, demonstrate their defeat by putting your foot on their neck. Now I want you to notice here, let's go to Psalm 110. Psalm 110, verse 1. The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. What do you do with a footstool? You put your feet on it. That's exactly what we see happening in Joshua. Look at Isaiah chapter 63. Isaiah 63 and verse 3. Speaking of Jesus, I have trodden the winepress alone, and the people there, and of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in mine anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. And then Romans 16:20, Paul tells the church of Rome that the Lord Jesus shall bruise Satan under your feet shortly. So we see this parallel. Now, I understand this isn't an exact parallel of everything, but this is one of the things that we mentioned back in Genesis, is there are these prophetic themes in the Bible. There is prophecy for the Jews was an issue not so much of prediction fulfillment, but it was pattern fulfillment. And so we see these themes and these patterns develop of how God works, what he does, and so we see these things being taken to another level when we get to the New Testament. When we get to the final fulfillment of all God's promises to Israel, it's along the exact same lines because he works according to theme and according to pattern. Then chapter 11 and chapter 12 is the northern campaign. Chapter 11 records the defeat of the kings of the north. And here is your blank. 31 kings in total have been defeated in the conquest of the south and of the north. 31 kings total, and the land rested from war. Now it's interesting to notice this, and we mentioned this last week. We showed the parallels of this conquest with the Christian life, or the life of the believer. As you look at the stages of their warfare, Jericho, there was really no battle that took place. God had entirely given them the city. Ai required a deployment of troops. Gibeon, there was a confederacy. And at Jabin, there was outright aggression. And so what we see taking place is the more victories they had, the more land they acquired, the more difficulty they experienced. And that's exactly the way it is with the Christian life. We like to think, and we kind of have this idea, well, you know, the Christian life should get easier as it goes on. The Christian life doesn't get any easier. As we learned in James in chapter 1, that God gives us trials to perfect us. And in perfecting us, he is really preparing us for more trials and more difficult tests to come. It kind of leads to the old adage, and here at the bottom of that paragraph, higher levels bring new devils. The more you grow in the Christian life, the closer you get to the Lord, the more trials you persevere through, the more tests you go through, the more mature you become, and in order to mature you more, the more trials, the more difficult trials and temptations come to perfect you that much more. And that's exactly what we see going on with Israel. The more land they had, the more victory they had, the more difficult the next victory became. Now in chapters 13 to 21 on the next page, we have the division of Canaan. This is where the land is being given by lot to each of the tribes. And let's look here in chapter 13. Chapter 13 is where we find the command for it. Chapter 13, verse 1. Now Joshua was old and stricken in years. And the Lord said unto him, Thou art old and stricken in years, and there remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. This is the land that yet remaineth. All the borders of the Philistines, and all Geshuri, from Sihor, which is before Egypt, even unto the borders of Ekron, northward, which is counted to the Canaanites, 5 lords of the Philistines, the Gazathites, and the Ashdodites, and the Eshkelonites, and the Gittites, and the Ekronites, also the Avites. From the south, all the land of the Canaanites, and Meara, that is beside the Sidonians, unto Aphek, to the borders of the Amorites. All the land of the Gibites, and all Lebanon, toward the sun rising, from Baal-gad, under Mount Hermon, unto the entering into Hamath. All the inhabitants of the hill country, from Lebanon unto Mizrephoth-maim. Anybody else can do better than that? Maybe we'll just get Alexander Scorby and just record it and just to have him play it. And all the Sidonians, them will I drive out from before the children of Israel. Only divide thou it by lot unto the Israelites for an inheritance, as I have commanded thee. Now therefore divide this land for an inheritance unto the 9 tribes and the half tribe of Manasseh. And you remember the other 2.5 tribes he had already given to them prior to their entering into the land on the other side, Jordan. Now, here's your blank. This is God's command to divide the land. And what they're going to do is they're going to stand before the tabernacle where God's presence is, and they're going to, in the presence of God, cast lots to divide up the land. But small groups of Canaanites remained. And we see that in chapter 13 and in chapter 15. After Joshua's death, these people made trouble for Israel. Also, the Philistine, the Sidonian, and Lebanon regions were still unconquered. And these people were going to continue to be a thorn in the flesh until the time of David. In 2 Samuel chapter 5 and chapter 8, we find that David actually makes a campaign to completely wipe out these people and finally rid the land as was supposed to be done. And I think a good point to be made is that the conquest of Canaan, as it pictures the Christian life, it is a place of battle. Our life as a Christian is certainly no bed of roses. Some people have this idea, well, if I just become a Christian, life will get easier. That is such a deception. That is such a lie. The Christian life is difficult. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But it's a battle, and the conquest will not be finished until the king comes. And that's one of the things we see with David. They still have the battles, they still have the enemies in the land until David comes. Well, it's going to be the same thing with us as believers until Jesus comes back, and that's when all the battles will be settled for good. And it's interesting to notice here in chapter 13, verse number 13, it says, Nevertheless, the children of Israel expelled not the Geshurites, nor the Maacathites, and the Geshurites, and the Maacathites dwell among the Israelites until this day. So this is interesting. chapter 13, verse 13 is the first reference in the book of Joshua to the children of Israel not doing specifically what God had commanded them to do. I don't know if maybe that's coincidence, maybe that's providence, but it's just interesting that it's 13:13 where this takes place. Israel failed to do as they were supposed to do. And it's interesting to note that David's wife, who bore Absalom, is from one of these nations that were supposed to have been destroyed. Imagine how different the kingdom of Israel would have been had Joshua and the children of Israel at this point done exactly what God had told them to do and wipe them out. The world would be a radically different place right now. Let's notice here, chapter 13, verse 22. Remember back in the book of Numbers, you have the Balaam, who is hired by Balak to curse the people of Israel. And you read that story, that account in the book of Numbers, and Balaam comes in on his gallant donkey, and he comes in all the pomp and circumstance of a hired prophet. And he's hired to curse the nation of Israel, and 3 times he makes an attempt, and 3 times he blesses the people. And then we find out that as he's about ready to leave, he tells Balak how to get the nation of Israel to be cursed, and that's to try to get them to mingle with the people. And then when you read the account there in Numbers, it just kind of looks like Balaam goes off untouched, and that's just kind of the end of the story. Well, now look what takes place here. Chapter 13, verse 22, Balaam also, the son of Beor, the soothsayer, did the children of Israel slay with the sword among them that were slain by them. So Balaam finally got his at this point. They finally took care of him. But now notice here to chapter 21. Let's jump over to 21. So they divide up the land, and you can see there in that picture, that's the land allotments on your sheet. And there's more that we could say about that, but we're not going to do that right now. But I want you to notice here, chapter 21, verse number 43. This is such an interesting passage of Scripture. We are premillennialist. That means we believe that Jesus Christ is going to return to the earth after the tribulation, but before the 1,000 years in which he will set up the kingdom, he will rule from Jerusalem. And at that point, Israel is going to inherit all of the land that God promised them. Now, one of the things that some people believe is what's called amillennialism, meaning that they don't believe that there is a millennium, that we're actually in the millennium. The millennium is just a figure of speech for a really long period of time, and we're actually in that millennium right now. And hats off to you, but you need to go see somebody about that problem, because you really got to take your brain out and play with it to not see a literal 1,000 years. But one of the reasons people hold to that view is this passage right here. Because as a premillennialist, we believe Israel does not have the land, but they will have the land. But notice what it says right here. Chapter 21, verse number 43. And the Lord gave unto Israel, what's the next word? All the land which he sware to give unto their fathers. And they possessed it, and dwelt therein. And the Lord gave them rest round about, according to all that he sware unto their fathers. And there stood not a man of all their enemies before them, and the Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. There failed not aught of any good thing which the Lord had spoken unto the house of Israel. All came to pass. So, did God give Israel the land? Or did he not give them the land? And what was the promise that God made? Genesis chapter 12, he promises them that they're going to have the land, all the land of Israel proper as we know it today, all the land over to the Euphrates River, along the Euphrates River, all the land up around northern Israel and all the way down to Egypt. It was all going to be theirs. Does Israel have that today? So what exactly does God mean here that he gave it all to them? At what point in the history of Israel did they ever possess that land? Never. So what does this mean? I think this is very interesting as I was studying this. So it's important because this is a very important question because it fulfills God's promise to Abraham to give them the land. Did God give them the land? Here's your blank. Yes. God did give them the land. This sums up God's fulfillment of the covenant promise that he gave to Abraham's seed. He would give them the land. And in a real sense, the Canaanites were in check. They were under military conquest as God had pledged. They posed no immediate threat for the nation. But not every enemy had been driven out. And so this leaves room for them to stir up trouble later. Now, to really understand this passage, exactly what he's saying to them, we have to consider the context of the book. And so I want you to go back to, I want you to look at a couple passages with me. Go back to the very beginning of Joshua, to chapter 1. Joshua chapter 1, notice verse number 2. God says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Okay? So God had already given them the land. He says, I give it to them. Now notice chapter 1, verse 5. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only, now here's the key, only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. What's the prosperity he's speaking of? Acquiring the land and dispossessing the enemies. Now let's look over to chapter 6. Verse 1, Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. Now, did God give Joshua and the children of Israel the city of Jericho? Yes. But what did Israel have to do? They actually had to go take it. They had to go march around it. Had Israel not marched around it, would they have actually received Jericho? No. Was it theirs for the taking? Yes, it was. Same with Ai. Same with Gibeon. And I want you to notice here, let's go to chapter 13. We have to keep this in the context. Chapter 13. Chapter 13, verse 1, at the very end, says, There remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. This is the land that yet remaineth. And then he tells about these nations that are there. Okay. Now let's go to then verse 13. Nevertheless, the children of Israel expelled not the Geshurites and the Maacathites. God told them, you need to get rid of these people, and they didn't do it. Okay. Now let's go to chapter 23. We were in chapter 21, but jump over to chapter 23, verse number 12. Well, verse 11, Take good heed therefore unto yourselves that ye love the Lord your God, else if ye do in any wise go back and cleave unto the remnant of these nations, even these that remain among you, and shall make marriages with them, and go in unto them, and they to you, know for a certainty that the Lord your God will no more drive out any of these nations from before you. But they shall be snares and traps unto you, and scourges in your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until ye perish from off this good land, which the Lord your God hath given you. So had God, it says there in Joshua 21, the Lord fulfilled His promise. He gave them all the land. Did He do that? Yes. The question is not, did God give them the land? Rather, the question is, did Israel possess the land that God had given them? And the answer to that is no. They didn't. They made leagues with the people there instead of drive them out. God had already said, look, I'm giving them to you. They'll not be able to stand before you. Just take them out. But they didn't do that. It says the land's yours. Unless you let somebody else stay on it. And that's exactly what the children of Israel did. And because the children of Israel failed to keep God's law and God's covenant, all those years in the Old Testament, God never allowed them to have all the land that He had, in fact, given them. He kept them in bondage. He kept them in dispersion. And now they're dispersed all over the world because they wouldn't keep His covenant. But the day is coming when Jesus Christ comes that He will regenerate them. They will believe on Christ. They'll receive a new spirit, and they will keep the statutes, and God will give them the land that He promised them. I personally think that's great myself. I enjoy that type of stuff. Now we come to the conditions for staying in the land. And that's the last few chapters here of Joshua, chapter 22 through chapter 24. In chapter 21, verse 43, through chapter 22, the entirety of chapter 22, Joshua rehearses the conquest. He tells them about the cities that they conquered, how they divide up the land, how God has been faithful to them. Chapter 23 then records Joshua's farewell address. And in this address, he reminds the people that God has faithfully given them the land and victory over their enemies. But he also prophesies to them that God will someday drive them from the land as the consequence for their disobedience when they mix with the heathen and go whoring after the strange gods. Let's look here at chapter 23, verse 4. If I can turn the page. Behold, I have divided unto you by a lot these nations that remain, to be an inheritance for your tribes, from Jordan, with all the nations that I have cut off, even unto the great sea westward. And the Lord your God, He shall expel them from before you, and drive them from out of your sight, and ye shall possess their land, as the Lord your God hath promised you. Be therefore very courageous to keep and to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses. That's exactly how the book of Joshua starts. That's what God commands Joshua. Joshua's getting ready to die. Now he tells the children of Israel, look, the command that came to me, you need to keep it now. That way the Lord will keep driving the people out. Verse 7, that ye come not among these nations. These that remain among you, neither make mention of the name of their gods, nor cause to swear by them, neither serve them, nor bow yourselves unto them, but cleave unto the Lord your God, as ye have done unto this day. For the Lord hath driven out from before you great nations and strong. But as for you, no man hath been able to stand before you unto this day. One man of you shall chase 1,000. For the Lord your God, He it is that fighteth for you, as He hath promised you. Take good heed, therefore, unto yourselves, that you love the Lord your God. Now notice this, verse 12. Everything sounded great up to that point, but now there's a but, essentially. Else, verse 12, if ye do in any wise go back and cleave unto the remnant of these nations, even these that remain among you, and shall make marriages with them, and go in unto them, and they to you, know for a certainty that the Lord your God will no more drive out any of these nations from before you, But they shall be snares and traps unto you, and scourges in your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until ye perish from off this good land, which the Lord your God hath given you. And behold, this day I am going the way of all the earth. And ye know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one thing hath failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spake concerning you. All are come to pass unto you, and not one thing hath failed thereof. Just real quick here, thinking of, he says, the nations and the gods. Who are those gods? Well, they're demons. Remember 1 Corinthians chapter 10 says that they're demons. So this is spiritual warfare. But I'll keep going here just a little bit. He says, verse 15, therefore it shall come to pass that as all good things are come upon you, which the Lord your God promised you, so shall the Lord bring upon you all evil things, until he have destroyed you from off this good land, which the Lord your God hath given you. When ye have transgressed the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and have gone and served other gods, and bowed yourselves to them, then shall the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and ye shall perish quickly from off the good land which he hath given unto you. So he says it. I've given you the land, but if you're not faithful, and you go back, and you follow the gods, and you marry into the people, then I'm going to kick you out of the land. I'm not going to let you have the land. And so the book closes with another rehearsal of the past, a renewal of the covenant with the people. And just real quick, did they follow? Did they actually obey the command of the Lord? Well, we'll get into that more in the book of Judges, but Judges chapter 2, verse 8 to 13 says, the people lived, they were faithful all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders that overlived Joshua. But then there arose a generation that knew not the Lord, nor the works which he had done. And that's where the book of Judges comes in and shows us that they did not keep it, and therefore God did not allow them to possess the land, but they were possessed by the people of the land. Father, thank you for this time that you've given to us to study your word. Thank you for your goodness to us and your mercy. And thank you for a good day in your house and fellowship today. Pray that you'll bless the word of God to our heart. Pray that you'll help us be faithful doers of the word. And I pray that you give us safety as we go our separate ways now. In Jesus' name, amen.